In this video, I will go over the story of the Mercedes-Benz 190E 16-valve models, as well as the involvement of AMG. Then I will discuss what 190E 16-valve buyers should look out for in today's market. The W201 190 was the first Mercedes offered in the compact sedan segment when it was introduced in 1982. One of Bruno Sacco's most respected designs, the 190 was the entry-level Mercedes for the 1980s, which was built to satisfy a new demand for compact cars. With a new, small and nimble platform, Mercedes wanted to get back into racing and take the W201 rallying. Mercedes asked British engineering firm Cosworth to develop a powerful four-cylinder engine for the rally car. During this time, the Audi Quattro was released with all-wheel drive and a turbocharged engine, making the rear-wheel drive 190E uncompetitive for rallying. Mercedes had the Cosworth engine ready and still wanted to go racing, so they turned to the German Touring Car Championship, or DTM. However, to compete in DTM, the cars had to be based on a road-going model. Thus, the 190E 2.316, otherwise known as the 190E Cosworth, was introduced in September 1983. The engine was based on Mercedes' M102 engine, which was a 2.3-liter four-cylinder. Mercedes removed their 8-valve cylinder head in favor of a detuned 16-valve head that Cosworth had developed for racing. The 16-valve head had improved airflow to the cylinder and allowed the engine to rev higher and produce more power. The pistons were strengthened compared to the normal 2.3 to handle the higher revs of up to 7,000 RPM. The 190E 2.316 engine developed a 185 horsepower and 174 pound-feet of torque without an exhaust catalyst at 10.5 to 1 compression. The 2.3 16-valve cars were fitted with a Getrag 5-speed manual gearbox with a racing-style dogleg first gear, giving an H pattern from 2-3 to 4 and 5. The rear axle featured a mechanical limited slip differential and a 3.07 to 1 final drive ratio. A 4-speed 722.4 automatic transmission was optional by 1985. The 16-valve cars also had stiffer sport suspension fitted with larger anti-roll bars and a lower ride height compared to the regular 190E. Self-leveling hydraulic suspension was used in the rear to complement the state-of-the-art 5-link rear suspension. The steering ratio was also tighter than the regular 190E, and the fuel tank was enlarged to 70 liters instead of 55 liters. The 2.316 weighed just under 3,000 pounds, or 1,360 kilograms. The 16-valve 190s had special, highly aerodynamic exterior bodywork with lower bumpers in the front and back, as well as a spoiler integrated into the trunk lid. The interior featured Recaro Sport seats for the front and rear passengers, as well as a few more dials in the center console. The 2.316 was available in only two colors, pearl black and smoke silver. The European market 190s had many options available, such as leather seats, a sunroof, and height-adjustable suspension, among other options. May 12, 1984 was an important day for the 190E 16-valve. To celebrate the opening of the new Nürburgring and to show its new car, Mercedes organized a race of some of the world's top drivers, competing in identical 190E 2.316s. The 20 cars on the grid featured all of the same minor modifications, such as stiffer suspension, upgraded brakes, tires, and safety equipment. The star-studded grid included former F1 champions Niki Lauda and Stirling Moss, among many others. Future champions were also on the grid, including Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna. Prost took pole position, but it was Senna who won the race with Lauda in second place. The race was a good boost for Senna's career, but it also kicked off the 190E's racing story. Private racing teams such as AMG entered 2.316s in DTM races throughout the 1980s, taking the fight to BMW and Ford teams. In 1986, the 190E 16-valve was introduced to the US market. The US spec cars had lower 9.7 to 1 compression engines and thus lower power at 167 horsepower and 162 pound-feet of torque. and could only rev up to 6,500 RPM. The rear axle on the US model also had a shorter 3.27:1 ratio compared to the Euro version. The US model also had different headlights and came fully loaded with power seats, air conditioning, a sunroof, and so on. 1987 would be the last US model year for the 190E 16-valve. In 1988, Mercedes introduced a larger 2.5-liter engine, again with a Cosworth-developed 16-valve head to increase its competitiveness. This time, the engine used a dual-row timing chain compared to the older 2.3 engine, which used a single-row timing chain. The 2.5-liter 16-valve produced 195 horsepower, despite having an exhaust catalyst and lower 9.7:1 compression. Paired with the 2.5 engine was a different rear axle with a shorter 3.27:1 ratio and electro-hydraulic rather than mechanical locking. The 2.5 16 added colors such as almandine red, astral silver, and later brilliant silver. For the 1988 DTM season, Mercedes started officially participating in DTM by backing 5 teams driving 190E 16 valves. AMG was the leading Mercedes team and they built a partnership on the racetrack. Through the late 1980s, BMW, Ford, and Mercedes fought for the championship, with Mercedes teams never placing higher than second in the driver's title, despite numerous race wins. With a continued focus on motorsports, the 2.516 Evolution was unveiled in March of 1989. The Evolution was built to satisfy DTM rules that require the race cars to have the same exterior shape as the road cars. The Evolution featured a different engine than the standard 2.5, with a shorter piston stroke and bigger bore, which allowed the engine to rev higher among other engine improvements. Once again, the engine was developed by Cosworth. Power remained at 195 horsepower with an exhaust catalyst. A power pack option engineered by AMG was available on the Evo. The power pack option included improved intake and exhaust camshafts, a larger diameter throttle body, as well as an improved intake and exhaust system. The result was an increase of 30 horsepower over the standard Evo, bringing the power up to 225 horsepower at a maximum of 7,600 RPM. Reportedly, a few power packs were actually fitted to standard non-Evo 2.5 16s. The wide fenders set the Evolution apart, as well as its larger rear wing. The brakes were improved and a stiffer, height-adjustable suspension system was fitted as standard. Bigger 16-inch wheels from the SL were fitted on the Evo's wider track. All Evolutions were painted in pearl black. A year later, in March 1990, the 2.5 16 Evolution 2 was unveiled. The Evo 2's 2.5 engine produced 235 horsepower and 181 pound-feet of torque. The engine was a further development of the Evo 1 engine, now with a different intake cam, stiffer valve springs, and 10.5:1 compression, among other improvements. The Evo 2 could now rev up to 7,700 RPM. The engine in the Evo 2 switched back to a single-row timing chain to make room for an upgraded oil pump. The rear axle on the Evo 2 had an even shorter 3.47:1 ratio. The bodywork featured even larger fenders and a massive rear spoiler to improve downforce. Like the Evolution 1, the suspension was height adjustable but went even lower down. The Evolution 2s were also fitted with 17-inch light alloy wheels. All of the Evolution 2s were painted in pearl black except for 2 cars in silver. Back on the racetrack with the 2.5 16 Evolution 2, the 1991 DTM season was looking up for Mercedes. 4 Mercedes-backed works teams competed. Klaus Ludwig, driving for Team AMG, came in second place in the Drivers' Championship, and Mercedes won the Constructors' Championship for 91. Even with very close racing, the Mercedes teams then dominated the 1992 season with no less than 16 wins. For the 92 season, Evolution 2s ran a 370 horsepower, 16-valve with a massive airbox and dry sump lubrication. The cars weighed just 980 kilograms, or about 2,160 pounds. Ludwig took the driver's title, and Mercedes took the constructor's title for '92. With these successes, AMG became an extremely well-known Mercedes tuner because of its 190E racing wins. The 190E 16-valve earned a strong racing pedigree on the track and has gone down in history as one of the most iconic race cars to come from the golden era of DTM, where customers could buy a road version of the racing car. Overall production numbers of the 16-valve road cars are as follows. A total of 19,487 2.316s were produced. About 1,953 of those were for the US market. 5,743 2.516s were produced in total. And then 502 Evolution 1s were produced, all built in 1989. 502 Evolution 2s were produced, all built in 1990. AMG led the way on the racetrack with its 16-valve car, but it also made some performance versions of the 190E for the street that were separate from the 16-valve cars. AMG offered the 190E 3.2 AMG in 1987. The engine was a tuned version of the M103 12-valve inline-six found in the 190E 2.6. Power was rated at 231 horsepower thanks to a better camshaft and that larger 3.2-liter displacement. Automatic and manual versions were produced. Distinctive AMG bumpers were fitted as well as AMG wheels. About 200 of these cars were built by AMG in black or silver. AMG also sold plenty of separate parts, such as bumpers and wheels, for 190 Mercedes at the time. But ultimately, the 16-valve cylinder head in the 190E Cosworth was so good that AMG really had a limited role with the 16-valve street cars. AMG's main role was on the track. The 190E 16 would end an era of Mercedes trying to develop its own performance cars. Going forward, AMG would slowly be handed over the role of performance division of Mercedes thanks to its racing successes. "190E 16 valves are a good classic car to own because they are relatively simple, they are fun to drive, and they have a good story. Here are some things to keep in mind when buying a 190E 16 valve. The M102 engine should run smoothly with no hesitations. The Bosch KE Jetronic fuel system is reliable, but it is difficult to set up if the engine is not running correctly and may require specialist attention. The 2.316 cars have a single row timing chain that can stretch or fail. This was corrected with the 2.516's dual row timing chain. Early 2.316s also had a weaker head gasket compared to the later cars. When driving the car, the manual gearbox should not require excessive force to change gears, and the automatic cars should change gears smoothly. It's good to see frequent fluid changes in the service history of a 190E 16 valve. Rubber parts such as driveline flex discs and suspension bushes should be inspected for wear. Also, check for any leaks around the pump or lines for the self-leveling hydraulic suspension. Keep an eye out for rust on the lower parts of the body panels, and also check the condition of the rubber seals, especially around the windshield. Inside the car, the dashboard can crack. Power items such as the sunroof and windows should be checked for proper operation. This may seem like a lot of things to keep in mind, but these are 30 to 35-year-old cars, so it has to be expected. When looking at the market today, the 190E 16 valve cars have been steadily rising in value. At the low end of the market, you can get a good 2.316 with the automatic transmission for about $10,000 to $15,000 even with lower mileage. But because of the character of the 190E, the automatic transmission is obviously the least sought after version. Next up are high mileage manual 2.3 and 2.516s, and they sell around $15,000 to $20,000. Low mileage examples of 16 valve cars trade between $30,000 and $40,000. Evolution 1 cars sell for around $100,000 with relatively low mileage. Evolution 2 cars sell for around $250,000 even with some modest mileage. Evo 2s have sold above $400,000 with less than 10,000 miles. Evo 2s are the pinnacle for collectors, and it was the Evo 2s that became so successful and iconic in DTM racing. That's it for this guide to the 190E 16 valve cars. I think it is clear that the 16 valve is an icon in the history of Mercedes-Benz and AMG. Thanks for watching, and if you want to support the channel, take a look at my store, link is in the description. If you want to see more Mercedes and AMG content, subscribe for more videos like this one.